It's witchcraft.
Hi, and welcome to a special Wheel of the Year Samhain edition of the Stoned Witches Hour. On this podcast, we get all witchy and talk about the 8 Sabbats in the pagan Wheel of the Year. Samhain is the third and final harvest festival and marks our further descent into the dark half of the year. The veil between this world and the afterlife is at its thinnest point, and spirits, both good and bad, walk among us in disguise. I'm your host, Layla, and tonight we celebrate the Witches' New Year. And with me,
Don't forget me. I'm Chelle.
never forget you, Chelle. How are you on this Samhain evening?
You know, on the East Coast, it is getting to be that Samhain type weather. The leaves are gorgeous. The air is crisp. The fog is out. And oh my God, tis the season.
I have to say, I loved it while I was there. All the rain, the cold days, the chilly evenings, the leaves, walking on the sidewalk through freshly fallen leaves on a crisp autumn day on the East Coast. You just can't beat it. This time of year, it's the best.
I mean, I don't hate summer, but this is a good time of year. and you know what's so weird? It's been very foggy here lately, like very foggy, eerie, like thick, dense at night fog. And it really kind of lends to the whole thinning of the veil concept of Samhain. And it's just, you go outside at night here and it's just like, do 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 do. Love it.
Even the weather is conspiring to make everything all spooky and creepy this time of year.
Absolutely. It's perfect. It's perfect. I love this time of year. I love this time of year.
Me too. It's absolutely lovely and combines so many of my favorite things: costumes and candy and skeletons and
apple cider.
Who doesn't love apple cider and pumpkin donuts?
The one thing about a Samhain tradition, I'm going to break right into a Samhain tradition. Bobbing for apples. Have you ever bobbed for apples? Do you know anybody who's bobbed for apples?
I have bobbed for apples when I was really, really little.
Like, are you just going in like horse mouth, horse mouth into this thing? Like, I've never done this. And it's like a fall tradition that I don't understand.
Horse mouth. And I recommend hold your breath, push an apple to the side or to the bottom. That's the trick. Don't try to catch one like in the middle of the water.
See, I
push it up against the bottom or the side. Then you can get a good grip.
The bottom? Are you going full head into this or what?
Hey, sometimes you got to go for it to get that apple. I mean, you're not always going to have a good side right there for you. You might have to dunk your whole face in that thing of water. I mean, come on.
But to kind of circle back to why we're here tonight, it's another tick. You know how I like to call them ticks. It's another tick in the wheel of the year. This is like the witch's new year. This is like the greatest.
A lot of people do call it the Witches' New Year. And the reason for that is because it was considered the Celtic New Year. So back in the day, this was the kind of that liminal space between summer and winter. You know, it's the third harvest and everything kind of was on hold until.
And basically it's like that final ushering in of the dark half of the year, because obviously calendar wise, we look at things differently in the modern times, but I look at Samhain as like the end of the outside world until spring.
Yeah, that's one of the things you have to kind of give up on the East Coast is you literally,
hermiting
as well as figuratively.
Yeah, you hermit in after Samhain.
Yep, you go within. It's like you said, it's ushering in that last half of the dark half of the year. This is when we really start to feel that it's the dark half of the year.
Right. Because everything, I don't know if it's modern times have kind of conditioned us, but it almost seems like nowadays, and we've talked about this in the past, summer is kind of like Beltane to Samhain.
Yeah,
that's kind of how we gauge our outside activities. Beltane is the beginning. You can go outside after that because it's warm enough to. And after Samhain, it's too damn cold.
That's so true. And to our listeners in the southern half of the world, you know, hello to South Africa and New Zealand. You guys are celebrating Beltane right now.
And how fabulous is that for them? They're getting into the warmer half of the year.
That's right.
So we're jealous, folks.
Well, I kind of really like Samhain. There's a lot about Samhain that I enjoy. I mean, would Beltane be as sweet if there wasn't a Samhain?
Exactly. Kind of that yin and yang.
Exactly. And there's a lot to be said for I'm an introvert. I kind of like the cooler days and cooler nights, especially in California. You don't get those that often. And so it makes it easier to get outside and do things, but it also makes it easier to get cozy indoors and do some crocheting or do some crafts or do things around the house. Work on yourself a little bit. It's a nice time of year to kind of balance that outward facing Beltane summer.
But also on a spiritual level, back in the if you follow the ancient Celtic spiritual traditions, they really did believe that this was kind of the barrier between our world and the spirit world. There's an easy transition now. Some people say the veil is thin. Other people say that door has opened. However, you
Yes.
want to convey the thought that the barrier between that physical world and that spiritual world breaks down to almost nothing at that point. And that's where you kind of get into some of the traditions of honoring your ancestors. If you're looking to speak to folks, if you want to talk to your grandma, now is the time,
Yes,
because this is where I personally feel that you can make those connections easier.
I agree. This is definitely the time of year when the Celts believed that the supernatural world, the world of death, was very close. It just kind of ran alongside this one. And as the harvest wore on, as we're harvesting that grain and things are dying, we're getting closer to that veil. And so the separation between this world and the world of the dead gets thinner and thinner until it's almost non-existent on Samhain. And this is, like you said, it's an excellent time for ancestor worship. And we've spoke before of a craft you can do that was inspired by Sarah and Kelly from our old community, where you take a plate because one of the things that you can do to honor your ancestors is to have a dumb supper or to set a place at the table for them so that they can join you for your feast
I
on
noticed
Samhain.
one thing they have here in Salem, and I never heard of it before. They call it a mute dinner, a mute supper.
It's the same. That's what a dumb supper means, a silent supper. Yep.
Yeah, yeah. And I was like, wow, I never heard of it referred to as that. I know I've heard of the dumb supper, but not a mute supper.
Yep. I guess being struck dumb was an old saying, like being struck speechless.
Well, and I think it also goes back to the times where they used to refer to folks with certain disabilities as deaf, dumb, and blind.
Yes, that's right. Exactly.
Dumb really was an old-fashioned way of saying mute.
Exactly. Yep. And so you can take your place setting that you're going to leave for your ancestors. And Sarah had a black plate that she got, a large black charger plate. And around it in gold and silver, she wrote the names of ancestors and people she knew that had passed on that she wanted to remember and to honor. And she wrote that around the plate in a spiral. And it's beautiful. And that's the plate that she would use for the dumb supper. And that's a wonderful way to connect with your ancestors. Building an altar is another thing that a lot of pagans and Wiccans will do this time of year. They put on pictures or mementos from your
Little
ancestors.
trinkets or something. What one thing I do, my grandfather was a fireman, and I have one of his fire badges, and I put that on my altar on Samhain, my grandpa's fire badge. My grandmother, Halloween was like her frickin' mecca. She loved Halloween even more than Christmas. You met her.
Oh, yes, I remember.
She had this little wooden pin. You know how back in the 70s, everybody had a pin. Everybody wore pins.
Yeah, brooches.
Yeah, she has this little wooden pin, and it's a painted cauldron.
Oh, wow,
And
nice.
I wear that every Samhain, even if
To
I just
honor
wear
your
it to work.
ancestor.
So I'll put my grandpa's badge on the altar, but I'll wear my grandma's pin, the cauldron pin, because that was her jam. That was her jam. That was her holiday. And even if it wasn't to remember ancestors, I would have done that anyway, because that was her favorite holiday.
I love that. I absolutely love that. When I was a kid on my grandmother's mantle, I always remember seeing this little Buddha guy,
Oh, that's so cute.
this little statue. Now, my grandparents were Christian, although my grandmother did introduce me to tarot cards when I was little. She very much liked spirituality. She was into divination and tarot. She's the one with the Ouija board. So this little guy is something I remember on her mantle. And after she and my grandfather passed away, we were all told we could take something of theirs. And this is what I asked to have. So this little Buddha statue is my little good luck guy.
Aw, that's
And
cute.
yeah, I've had him since I was 19, and he goes on my altar as my remembrance of my grandparents, as one of my ancestor items that goes on my altar.
Aside from the ancestor altars and offerings to our passed on loved ones and such, bread. I don't know why bread, but because it's like the final harvest, I don't know.
Yes, it,
I always want bread product at Samhain.
yes, because we're cutting down the grains. It's that ancient tradition of the harvest and cutting and threshing of the grains. And so baking of bread is an actual symbolic act because Samhain is life and death. It's everything. It's all of that. And when you're harvesting the bread or when you're harvesting the grain, you're killing it. You're cutting it down. That's the whole death of the green man. And you cut down that grain and everything goes quiet and fallow for the winter. But then you bake bread out of it. And now you've created something new. You have new life and you have bread. So it's a wonderful way to remember that. I know that in Mexico, for the Day of the Dead celebration, which is right around the same time on the 1st, one of the things they do is bake cookies and sweet things to remind you of the sweetness of life.
I just wanted to say one thing that the Celts also did was they would leave out baked goods or cookies or things of that nature out for the fairies. So they would leave out stuff for the fairies and the Sidhe because that was kind of like their last offerings of the year.
Exactly.
And they were kind of trying to buy them off for the winter months. You know
Right?
what I
Because
mean?
exactly the way the veil is thinnest, and it's not just your ancestors that are coming back. It's bad people, it's tricksters, it's the Sidhe,
It's Fae, it's
it's the Fae, it's the
everything.
Tuatha De Danann. It's you might be caught up in the wild hunt on this night. And so people would dress up and wear masks to kind of fool the bad spirits that would come around. They'd carve turnips and other gourds, later pumpkins, and light them to scare away bad spirits. And they'd leave offerings for the good ones and to appease the bad ones, to maybe kind of leave them alone.
And that kind of is what led to the modern day jack-o'-lanterns and costumes.
And whereas Samhain and the Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos, are very, very similar in that it's ancestor worship and honoring those that have gone before and using lights and offerings. And in Dia de los Muertos, it's called an ofrenda, the altar that you put up for your ancestors. We just call it an altar, but we use a lot of the same things.
Well, it's more about celebrating the dead. It's not about grieving the dead. And I think
Right.
probably a very important distinction to make to folks. Samhain is the thought behind it is definitely not grieving based. It's
Right.
more celebratory based.
And it's not to say you might not be sad inviting, your deceased loved one over for dinner, but essentially you're inviting them back into your home to be part
Right.
of your family again while warding off the bad ones or the Sidhe.
Right. That trickster. Loki's
Right.
out there, people. Loki will come to you on Samhain. You don't want that
Sure.
kind of mojo.
Exactly. And while Halloween is kind of derived from Samhain, it's not the same. There's the whole giving of offerings and the possible tricksters and the wearing of masks and the carving of pumpkins. But a lot of those traditions came to the United States in the 1840s when the Irish came here after the famine, and they brought with them a lot of their Samhain traditions, including asking for
Masks.
food,
Yep.
masks, asking for food from neighbors for the feast, and trickster things, causing trouble. And it got to be so out of hand that I believe in the early 1900s, some major cities started having sanctioned celebrations on All Hallows Eve or Halloween to kind of tone down some of the mischief night and Samhain trickster things that were happening.
But back when some of those Celtic traditions were brought over here by the Irish and whatnot, we've talked about this on other Sabbath episodes about the correlating Christian holidays. People forget because for pagan folk, this is absolutely a high holiday.
Yes,
It's like our
it is
Christmas
one of the
here.
4 major Sabbaths of the year.
Right. And people forget that there is a Christian correlated holiday They've made it a lesser holiday, but November 1st is All Saints Day. And that was kind of their way of trying to, we've talked in the past about how they tried to sway the pagans away by creating their holidays around the same times. So, kind of to combat Samhain, they have All Saints Day.
Yep. And then, again, they couldn't stop people from celebrating the old ways. And so they kind of incorporated it into their ways. I mean, you'll legit see them do the dumb supper and have the bread and all the same things. So that's kind of the Christian holiday that's now around this time. We've also mentioned the Dia de los Muertos, the Mexican holiday, the Day of the Dead. And I feel a lot of kinship with that because it is so similar to Samhain. And I do love bones. My idea of bones being we all have a skeleton. Bones are the same underneath us all, and they last for a very long time. They fascinate me. We're still finding bones of people that are thousands of years old. I mean, come on, that's so cool. But
I'm one of those parents. My kids are in their 20s, and I still have every one of their teeth.
Yeah,
Every baby tooth from both those kids, I have still to this day.
I did until I ritually let them all go. So
the thing is that somewhere in my head, I'm like, I don't want somebody getting their hands on my kids' bones. God knows what they're going to do with them.
Right, sure. Bones are important. They contain our DNA. They contain so much. And so La Catrina they have a lot of the sugar skulls and things like that in Dia de los Muertos. Right around now is also Diwali. I believe Diwali just ended. That's a festival of lights. It's not exactly about death, but it is about life and rebirth and growth and that kind of thing. And that happens often this time of year.
I believe Diwali started on Sunday, October 23rd, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and I think it goes for 5 days.
Right.
So, and that's again not the same, but it is a holiday that's going on now, and it does have to do with it's the festival of lights. It's the triumph of good over evil.
I
that
do
kind
think
of thing.
the important thing to kind of always remember, no matter what you believe, is no matter your religion, your belief, your spirituality, we all have coinciding holidays.
It's interesting to me that this time of year it's that harvest time of year, like when people we start to figuratively go inward. Samhain is a good time to sacrifice what didn't work for you.
Reflect.
Yeah.
Reflect is a good word I like to use with Samhain. It's a good time to reflect on the last year as well as how do I want the next year to go.
Yeah, a great ritual I like to do on Samhain is to literally do a ritual of letting go. Not just ancestor work, but you can also take something about yourself or a relationship that you didn't like or something that happened during the year that wasn't, good for you. You can write that down on a piece of paper. And if you're lucky enough to be in a community that has a bonfire, you can throw that into the bonfire and release that for during this time is a great time to let go of that doesn't serve you, sacrifice it.
You know how I'm weird and I'm different than everybody
Yes.
else. You know what I've done for a long time on Samhain, and it is so against what everybody else does.
What's that?
I actually make wishes.
Ooh.
And you want to know why?
Why?
Because I feel like, I mean, that I've always had kind of that connection, especially with my grandfather.
Yes.
I remember my garage apartment when my grandfather would show up, and
his ghost was there all the time. Shit would move. Blankets that you were near would suddenly get an indentation in it like someone sat down. It was freaky.
But, I kind of always looked at it as a time where I kind of focused more specifically on my grandparents. And
you were always so close with him.
I always kind of took it as a time where I could specifically ask him for wishes.
Oh, because he's right there.
Not like a wish upon a star kind of a wish, but hey, Grandpa, could you help me out here? Like those kind of, like a specific, You know what I'm saying? I've taken that approach because I feel like that's like the best time. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. I love that. A lot of times I would talk to my grandmother, my mother's mother that passed away before I was born. But I've often been told I am her twin. I'm her spitting image and I act like her. I talk like her, very much a lot like her. And I feel very connected to her in a lot of ways. She was a very cool lady from everything I understand. And so I can feel her very strongly on Samhain. And I do enjoy being able to talk to her a little more closely. And that's something, taking some time to meditate, to set up your altar with pictures, with notes to people that you love. Have a little fire or a candle if you can't have a fire, and write a letter or write a physical note to someone that has passed on, and burn it. Let it go. It's a great way to communicate with spirits. It's also an excellent time to do divination, or to get a tarot reading, to get an astrology reading from someone.
It's also a good time to take that one last walk out in nature before you have to wait 6 months to do it again.
Oh my gosh, yes. If you are in on the East Coast, or you're in a climate where you're going to get trapped inside because the weather is going to be shit, then definitely take that time. It's really nice in California, Southern California. The weather is just balmy and perfect this time of year. It does start to get a little bit colder. I can't do exactly all the things you want to outside. So yeah, enjoy the weather. Get out while you can, and try to soak it all in.
One last cool tradition. I don't know if you remember this, but one Samhain ritual we did when we were in the pagan community back in upstate New York together. Do you remember the time we sat around and part of the ritual was telling ghost stories? I thought that was cool as shit. What a better time
Yeah,
to tell ghost stories?
it's an amazing time to tell ghost stories. I mean, how fun is that?
I don't know. I feel like I do more reading this time of year. I do more investigating this time of year. Maybe it's just because I don't leave the house this time of year.
It kind of gets back to, this is the time of year to reflect. This is the time of year to go inward. Ask your relatives about stories from their past. Ask about stories of people that aren't there anymore. If you know someone who has gone on, and you know someone who is close to them, ask for a story about them. Ask for a memory of their life.
Another thing I did, because, we are in the modern world now, and you and I are both parents to some lovely, lovely children.
Mm-hmm.
We still have to buy into the hype of pop culture Halloween.
I kind of love pop culture
I
Halloween.
love Halloween. I love Samhain. I love Halloween. Love it all. I'd take the kids out trick or treat, and I would make them leave a piece of candy. I don't know if you remember, in my old house, I had that front porch that I never used a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Each kid would leave a piece of candy out on that front porch.
Oh, leaving offerings for the Fae is definitely an excellent idea.
Now, they'd, of course, leave a piece of candy that they didn't want, but that wasn't the point.
Yeah, leaving an offering for the Fae. If you are having a dumb supper and you serve food onto that plate, you can a lot of times take that plate outside and leave it for the Fae and for the creatures outside if you're able to. But I love your idea of leaving a piece of candy out.
But be forewarned, our listeners don't know this, but you do. I used to have my beautiful kitty cat, Salem. Remember Salem?
I do remember Salem.
So one year, one of my children decided to leave out a Jolly Rancher because it was a flavor they didn't like.
Mm-hmm.
Well, apparently, I used to let this was an outdoor cat, and we had let him out, and he must have ripped the package or whatever. And when he had come into the house a day or two later, guess what was stuck in his damn fur that I had to cut out? The Jolly Rancher offering.
He had the thickest, the blackest, the most floofy fur.
With a watermelon Jolly Rancher stuck in him.
That must have been terrible.
Well, then I thought it was bad mojo because I'm like, oh my God, the cat takes the offering. If a neighbor kid took it, whatever. But I'm like, the cat, stay away, man. You knew this cat. He knew better.
He did. He should have known better.
He was just messing with us. It was just one of those simple, every kid's willing to give up one piece of candy.
Mm-hmm. I will also admit, this is a time of year I love to throw on my black cloak and go haunting the local graveyards just to see what I can see. Pick up an acorn or a cute branch that's now a wand or something like that. And I love it. Look for stones or hollows. What are they called? The wish stones, the ones with the holes in them.
Hagstones.
Hagstones. And of course, creepy me, when I was a teenager, I found the bones of a bird. And I was so thrilled. And I had those on my altar forever.
Oh my God. That you would do that. I'd be like, I wouldn't even touch that shit. And you'd be like, yeah, let me take that home.
I did too.
There's where our witchy differences lie. You are all bones and stuff. And I'm like, man, has that shit been sanitized? But people think you need to spend a lot of money. I had someone I was talking to earlier this week in my day job, and we were talking about like altar stuff. Mm-hmm. I happen to work with someone who's like, ooh, there's another witch at work. Let's talk. And I don't mind.
No. When have you ever minded?
And she's like, well, I was at this store and this store, and that some of that stuff's expensive. I'm like, you know what? Go outside, get yourself a red leaf that just blew off a tree. Go get a twig that broke off of this. Take 5 of those twigs and make a pentacle out of them and take some shoestring and tie them together. Boom, there you go. People think that it's all about what you spend on your altar.
Nope.
It's not.
Something that you made is always going to be better than something that you bought. I mean, not to say that things that you buy aren't awesome. I love pretty things.
Oh, I love pretty things,
Give me shiny things all day long.
but pretty things are pretty, not necessary.
Right. And not necessarily powerful. Samhain is also a time when I like to actually do ritual. It's the veil's too thin for me to just want to sit there and kind of
It's almost like an
visualize.
obligation.
Yeah. And to wear your black, your protective color, and to go outside, make a circle of leaves, make a, kind of break out a circle in your fall leaves if you're lucky enough, and have that barrier or use bird seed and walk a circle, and call each quarter. Use your air, your fire, your water, and your earth, and walk the circle to protect it and to bind your circle and make a safe space to do your ritual, to do your memorial to your ancestors, or to honor that third harvest, or to sacrifice something from your past and to move forward. It's doing ritual on that night is just, it feels different. It hits different.
I think one thing that I've also found very important about this time specifically, not only has the earth sacrificed in the form of you've taken down your crops, you've chopped them down, you've cut them down, you've dug them out of the ground, whatever hell you're doing with your crops. Just as the earth has to make that sacrifice, what's your sacrifice? You're going to go into the new year, you got to give something up. That's the deal.
That's right.
Whether it's a habit, whether it's, I don't know what, you got to give something up. Almost like a
Yeah,
New Year's resolution.
exactly. Exactly. It's an excellent time to do that. And I have to say that there was a Samhain in particular right before I met my husband that I was finally ready to let go of bad habits of the past, old relationships of the past, things that hadn't worked for me. I was ready to just let go of all of it, start new, and just really be happy with myself, right? Not look for relationships or
Oh,
any
I
of that.
remember that Samhain, and I also remember the following Beltane.
So
I was
that
there.
Samhain, after the community ritual, while the bonfire was still up, I did a small ritual. I had a friend do a heartbeat drum and everything. And I threw some things into the bonfire to kind of sacrifice that past and let go and start new. And that Beltane, my bestie, was convinced to bring the love of my life to Beltane.
You're
And
welcome.
thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So, but I think it really started that Samhain when I was ready to make those sacrifices, when I was ready to let go of things that didn't serve me, finally ready to grow up and to shed those things. And I'm not going to say that it was easy because it wasn't. It was hard and it was difficult. It was a very heart-wrenching ceremony, but
And look what you got out of it 6 months later.
exactly, exactly. Just because something's hard to let go of doesn't mean that you shouldn't, and I had a lot of baggage from a lot of shit in my past, and I was more than willing to kind of throw that in the fire and let the new year start fresh. And half a wheel of the year later, I reaped the rewards. So it's worth it.
And look, folks, here we are 20 some years later, and they're still happily in love.
That's so true.
But that change in you all started with giving something up.
That's
What's
exactly
what's the
right.
sacrifice?
Yep, that's right.
I don't believe in resolutions. Resolutions are kind of weird, but sacrifices, I guess you could say it the same. I guess you could say it's different, but I guess it sounds better if you call it a sacrifice and not a resolution.
Well, if you don't sacrifice, if you make a resolution, you're just kind of making a promise to yourself.
You're lying to yourself.
Oh, we know how you feel. But if you sacrifice something and let go of things that aren't serving you, that's a little bit different. You're not really making a promise so much as cleaning house, as letting things in your life go that need to be let go. And sometimes you need to do that.
Just like the earth that lets things die, you need to just let things die.
Exactly. Just like, what was her name? Persephone's mother, the goddess of hearth and home. Not Hecate.
Demeter.
Demeter. There you go. So Persephone's mother, Demeter, sacrificed her daughter. Her daughter went to the underworld and she had to let her go. And so now everything is kind of dying and because she's sad about her daughter being gone. So you've got Persephone and Hades as gods this time of year.
Which we've actually, we used to do some passion play based rituals, and we actually kind of did that whole Persephone, Demeter, Hades, transitioning to the underworld, dark half of the year concept for a ritual. And I loved it. I miss it. Let's do it again.
We should. I miss community. I do have to say, I very much miss that community, and I haven't really found anything to replace that. Let's see, a goddess that you're familiar with, Hecate. She's a good triple goddess for this time of year to call upon.
Definitely the going within and seeing what you hide from yourself. And those are the
Yes.
things that you can kind of really delve into at this time of year.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much about looking at the dark half of yourself, being comfortable with who you are when you're alone and kind of going through all of that.
The
You
yin
know.
is easy, the yang, not so much. And here we are. Yeah.
Not so much. That's right. The fire obviously is a symbol of life. And back in the day, the ancient Celts, from what I understand, people would put out the fires throughout the whole village. Everybody's fire would go out, all the hearth fires. And they would light one fire, bonfire or bone fire, because it would often be lit with bones. But they would light this main bonfire and then everyone would come to that as part of the celebration and they would take fire from that central bonfire back to their home and relight their hearth fire with it. And it's just kind of a reminder that that fire is life and that everyone is connected.
And we would stay up late at rituals, a little late. One thing I always remember is that fire was dying at the end of the night. And, upstate New York, end of October, a little chill.
A little bit.
As that fire went down, it would sink in because we'd start to freeze.
Yeah, from the rituals before where it was warm and comfortable all night long and we could drum
You
and
walk
dance.
It's Samhain, you walk away from that fire, your ass is cold. So it kind of gives you that everything is shutting down. Everything is kind of retreating. Just like the fire is dying down, the light is dying down. As that fire goes dark, we go dark as well.
That's right. That's right. And so we kind of have to hold on to that fire and the memory of that fire. And we have to use this time of going within and darkness to find new talents, to find new things to start.
Samhain is also a good time for storage. By storage, I specifically mean this is where a lot of cultures and societies would get the final harvest and their final crops in a state of storage. Back at MAB, and we talked about canning and doing those types of things. The stuff that they've been able to harvest since Mabon through Samhain, again, they're either going to be packed away to sustain through winter, canned to sustain through winter, whatever the case may be based on the crop. So this is also kind of the final gathering time of food and supplies hunkering down for winter.
If you're lucky enough to be able to dry your own herbs or, store your own crop, brava, more power to you. If you can't, maybe you want to, buy some fresh herbs at the store and dry them. Or maybe you just want to try your hand at a new craft. Maybe you don't actually necessarily want to make bread or want to can something, but now's a good time to learn something new, to kind of, like you said, read more books.
Expand yourself, expand your knowledge, expand your thought process. I mean, the light really starts to come back, as we'll talk about again in Imbolc. Come out of the light better. However, whatever's better for you, come out better.
So basically, we've ascertained that from Samhain until roughly Beltane, it pretty much sucks on the East Coast. So you guys all need to learn how to knit. And on the West Coast, we're going to be surfing and hiking and biking and having a grand old time.
You and I talked about this previously, but I have a plan for my dark half of the year.
Oh, what is your plan for the dark half?
As most of our listeners have gathered over time, especially if you follow us on Instagram, I am what they call a tarot deck whore. I have an addiction problem with tarot decks. Love them, love them, love them. But I am going to spend my dark parts of this year learning a new divination technique.
Oh, do tell. What are you going to learn?
I love tea. I've always loved tea. I don't like
That's
coffee.
true.
People do not judge me. Do not send us hate mail about me hating coffee. It's a thing. And so I've always drank tea my whole life. I love tea. It never dawned on me to do tea leaf readings until recently.
What?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess I was so
I'm
obsessed with
surprised.
tarot.
That's
Yeah.
true. You've been literally obsessed with tarot for as long as I've known you.
Right. So, 160 decks later,
I
I'm gonna
think that
delve.
number has gotten bigger from the last time you said it on here, Shell.
I
Do we
am
need to have an
delving.
intervention?
Yeah, we kind of do. I'm gonna delve into learning how to do some tea leaf readings.
That sounds fantastic. I have to say, I've gotten a new tarot deck recently, but like I've gotten one, and in that same time, I think you've gotten 12.
I am on a first name basis with my Amazon guy as well as several tarot shops in town. I'll admit it. It's a problem, folks. But
Uh-huh.
if you ever want to look at a deck, let me know because I probably have it and can send you pictures.
And hey, if you want a Samhain tarot reading, Shell and would both be happy to give you a little one. Well, maybe not all of you, but maybe one or two of you.
If you're good.
That's right.
But shoot us an email and maybe we got something in the cards for you.
Oh, I like the sounds of that. This is an excellent time of year for divination, whatever your flavor of divination is. And I have to say, I too am going to be doing something interesting that
Ooh, what?
involves divination.
What?
Well, do you remember how we kind of made Ouija boards when we were together in Salem?
That was the best Ouija board I've ever used in my life, by the way. Folks, there's a picture of it on Instagram. That shit is top notch.
I have decided that I am going to use one of two methods to permanently preserve our beautiful cardboard Ouija boards. I'm either going to cast it in resin, epoxy resin, or I'm going to decoupage it onto a nice piece of wood. So if anyone has an opinion, should I use epoxy resin and encase it in that and make it all cool? Or should I decoupage it onto like a really nice piece of wood?
Well, maybe one of our listeners has tried both of those things and would be able to actually tell us if one of them is a good or a bad idea.
There you go. So I'm going to spend some time learning how to do that and make you and I our
Ah,
beautiful homemade Ouija boards to make them safe
yay!
and permanent.
And by the time your birthday comes, I'll have a full grasp on tea leaf reading and I'll do a tea leaf reading for you.
Oh, I love it. You'll have to do it on air. So, and we'll have to be together so I can drink the tea.
Maybe if you're good, I'll
Oh,
come to
yay.
you.
That would be so fun. Yes, because coming out here to California, there's so many spooky, creepy places that we could go visit.
So, for all of our listeners out there, after the holidays, because let's face it, I got kids and now I got a grandkid, I got money to spend here for Christmas. But after the holidays, there could be a Chelle and Layla reunion in California.
Ooh, yay. Wherever it happens to be, I will be there and be happy because I
And
had
I'll do a
so
tea leaf
much fun.
reading.
I love that. I love that. I'll do a tarot reading for you. I mean, I'm sure you're always the one doing them, so I'll do one for you.
I always will take a reading from you. What are you talking about?
Yeah, they're always nice. So, yeah, Samhain, I love it. This is just a beautiful time of year, and I hope everyone's having fun trick-or-treating and, leave something out for your ancestors.
And if there's any listeners who decided to come to Salem for Halloween, God bless you, first of all. Hope you found some parking,
May all the gods keep you safe.
right? May the gods keep your car safe. And if nothing else, just remember we're all human here, folks. Be kind, be polite, love one another.
Yeah, please don't litter. Be good to Salem. It's a very old town.
Be good no matter where you are. Let's face it.
Oh, that's a very good point.
East Coast, West Coast, North, South. I don't give a shit where you are. You could be in a different country than Layla and I. Be good, folks. Be
That's
kind.
right. Be kind to each
Be
other.
kind, humans. We need a little more kindness in this world. And, maybe one of the bad habits you could shed at Samhain is being more loving to humans.
You don't want to shed that.
You want to add that.
Yeah.
Well, I was initially gonna say you need to shed being an asshole here and there, but I thought that was kind of mean. So I was trying to turn it around and it didn't work out for me. Shed your not so niceness, folks. Be kind.
Yes, I'm with Shell on this one.
Do some divination. If you have kids, take them out trick or treating because I still say, I don't care what anybody says, trick or treating with your kids is an equally beautiful way to celebrate Samhain.
And if you show up at my door and you say trick or treat, you're getting candy. I don't care how tall you are. I don't care how old you are. If you're polite and you say trick or treat, I got candy for you.
Shit, how am I going to get to California for candy knocking on your door?
I love it. We decorate to the nines and everyone loves our house. We always have so much fun. I do love being in a neighborhood where lots of kids come through. It is a blast.
And you know, actually that's one last thing I wanted to quickly mention because you sparked this idea. I had someone at work ask me if Halloween offended me as a witch. Do you know any witches or pagans or Wiccans that are actually offended by like Halloween proper?
No, I don't. That's not to say there aren't any, but I can't think of any. The only thing I could think of where I've ever heard of anyone being offended was there were some signs at a Walmart once years ago that was basically like burn the witch. I don't know. There was some the only good witch is a dead witch. There were some signs like that that I know people really worried people and found offensive. But other than that, I've never heard of that.
In my former workplace, when I was still in New York State, I would get offended on how my workplace, their idea of decorating for Halloween was pretty much solely green-faced witches. And like
Yes.
they knew that I was pagan and knew that I was a witch. And I felt like it was a dig. And I really, because of that, kind of came to hate the green-faced witch thing. I love Wizard of Oz, don't get me wrong, but I love green, don't get me wrong.
Love Bora.
I love Bora, but somehow that green-faced witch can tend to rub me the wrong way. But as long as people are ridiculously offensive, I am down with Halloween. I love dressing up. I love going out. I was brokenhearted when my kids stopped trick-or-treating at like 18 or 20 years old.
Yeah.
But I would be the first person. You give candy to teenagers, folks, because those teenagers could be vandalizing, procreating when they're too young to, doing drugs. Give them the candy if they knock on your door. There's nothing wrong with it.
And as a parent of children who were taller than me by the time they were 9 years old,
No joke. True story.
true story, don't tell me my kids are too old. She was 9. 9. Just because they're tall doesn't mean they're not little.
My kids, I can't remember if it was 18 or 20, but my kids trick-or-treated until they were like 18 or 20.
I would have happily given them candy.
Yeah.
No joke. I have zero problems with that. I love it.
But I was in a neighborhood where people embraced the concept. If they're trick-or-treating, they're not causing trouble. Just give the kids candy.
I do remember one year trick-or-treating in your neighborhood with my kids, and we had a blast because the neighborhood went all out. There were adults giving adult beverages to other adults that were trick-or-treating. People were, pulling wagons behind them with food. There were barbecues. There was music. It
We
was a
were walking
whole...
down the street in cloaks and nobody was looking at us with weird
Yes.
faces.
Oh, yeah. I always dress up as a witch.
Yeah. What's your costume, really?
This is me, 365.
Yeah. So, folks, we want you to have a happy and safe Samhain. We want you to have a happy and safe Day of the Dead and New Year. And we'll catch you for the next tick in December.
Yeah, we'll see you on the other side of the veil. Thanks for listening to the Stoned Witches Hour with Chelle and Laylla. If you like what you heard, please rate us and consider giving us a review. It really helps the show out, and we'll definitely take a toke of the kindest bud in your honor.